Neal, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
I'm super excited to be speaking with you today because there are so many different directions in which we can take this conversation. And as a moderator, I'll do my best to kind of follow some type of linear or narrative
Sure.
storyline to this podcast episode. But I want to start with a more recent current event because in addition to being, a CEO and a founder and a chairman, you are also now a number one best-selling author of the book Insured
Thanks.
to Death. And I
Yep.
encourage all of our
Here we
listeners to
go.
to check it out. There it is.
Right here. Here we go. Yeah.
And
Thanks,
so
Andrew.
my very first question for you, Neal, is what was the catalyst for writing Insured to Death? Was there, a specific moment or a personal experience that pushed you to start the project?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a series of catalysts. I mean, as you kind of see in the book subtitle, it's Insured to Death, how health insurance screws over Americans and how we take it back. I'd say there were kind of like three defining catalysts, uh, two being external and one being kind of internal. So over the years, I've gone through, a varied care journey, taking care of loved ones, and through my wife's multi-year cancer battle, had faced significant health insurance claim denials, for very necessary treatments and therapies. And I just thought it was an individual issue. This was a few years ago. Then I now run one of America's largest elder care platforms at CareYaya. And through that, we help thousands of people who are taking care of loved ones with dementia. It's either the adult children or the spouses, taking care of mom or dad, living with dementia. And we see at scale, all these people dealing with health insurance denials. So I've been kind of like thinking about it and working on internal ways to help people fight back. And then, of course, the third external catalyst was what happened in December, with the shooting of the United Health CEO, by Luigi Mangione. Really, I think woke up society to the fact that, hey, there's something going on, that there's such popular rage at the insurers. And this epidemic of claim denials is beyond, what everybody thinks. It's just happening to them, whether it's individual patients, physicians, family caregivers, people are drowning in this. So I thought it was like one of the biggest kind of epidemics of our time that has gone under discussed for far too long. And I really think over the last few years, the health insurers have really weaponized a new technology, which is AI, and individual patients and, family caregivers and doctors, they don't even stand a chance. So I think it's been asymmetric warfare. One person's programmatically denying stuff, and then the other side doesn't have this technology and has to sit there and do 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours of BS work. And, just people feel powerless. So I kind of wanted to, I've been in that situation myself, feeling powerless. I've helped tons of families who are caregiving, been in that situation who feel powerless. I've talked to so many doctors who are burning out of the system. I think it's an absolute travesty. So the book was kind of almost catalyzed by what's happening in the world. And, I really like the main purpose of the book was really kind of the part at the end of the subtitle is how we take it back. I really wanted to have people get a sense that one, there is agency. There's things you can do individually, to navigate this BS system that we have. And I think there's collective action that we can do to change policy. So I think that was really the message and the catalyst for the book.
Mhm. And yeah, I certainly want to talk a little bit about the playbook in due time, but just some quantitative stats here to kind of contextualize, I think, the scale and the magnitude of the issue that you are discussing here. And
Yeah.
the first one that is kind of mind-boggling to me, and I have to chuckle at this every time I read it, but in your book, you mentioned that American hospitals employ more billing specialists than beds. Physicians complete an average of 43 prior authorization requests a week, and these administrative costs consume $800 billion annually, which represents almost one third of the total US healthcare spending. So, just some quantitative stats I think that help contextualize the scale and the
Yes.
magnitude of the issue we are discussing. But I also want to move to the more qualitative side because behind every denied claim is, an individual, a friend, a family making tough choices. And you even talked about how you have been in that situation before. And I've heard you kind of talk about the human cost of this very complex multi-payer system. So were there any stories or interviews that particularly stuck with you as you were writing this book?
Oh yeah, I mean tons of them, tons of them. And thank you for pointing out the quantitative side too, because I try to write it where it's like, okay, it's health policy, but it's also applicable just to the layperson reader. But I do think sometimes it's helpful for people just to see the sheer numbers of like how much administrative waste. I think the number of employment, that's going into this whole industry for this. If you look on any job board, whether it's Indeed or LinkedIn or whatever, you literally have America where there's more people employed in an industry to process claims than there are to actually deliver healthcare. I mean, I think that alone should be a total joke to any policymaker. This is not a healthcare system. This is a Kafka-like bureaucratic maze. So I think that and that's inefficiency in spending too. I think for all the talk that insurers say about efficiency, it's actually systemic inefficiency. We're just wasting money. I think to your point about the individual stories, yeah, tons. I mean, like I'd say, and of course we want to be sensitive to the individual people, so we kind of anonymize names. But I'd say probably the story I've seen most of the time through running CareYaya, the caregiving platform, is an adult son or daughter that's caregiving for a mom or dad, and they're literally drowning in paperwork. Mom got, let's say mom is living with dementia, got hospitalized, fell. Okay, went to the ER, came back, and oh, here's a ton of bills, right? Then, oh, mom had XYZ surgery, right? Let's say knee surgery, hip surgery, broke a hip. I mean, oh my God, people are just drowning in so many denials of claims and just getting jammed with these bills after the fact. I think medication denials are also very much on the rise. So a lot of people are literally, and I've literally have close people that I know that we're caring for that are older adults living with, metastatic cancer. And, they might have 3 or 4 years of life expectancy. And, they're on a simple medication that they've been taking for months. And then suddenly 1 month it got denied. And then people are deciding, okay, do I have the money to pay for this out of pocket? Why is it denied? Or, am I going to skimp on food? I mean, this is like really, when you think about real people's stories, when insurers are denying care that was supposed to be delivered, a lot of people who don't have the means are now rationing food or worried about kind of their housing. And I mean, I think that's like an absolute tragedy. It's almost as if these people didn't have insurance at all, so what was the point?
Yeah, I want to continue down that thread because your book proposes a playbook for being able to fight back
Yeah.
against some of these layers of bureaucracy and layers of complexity. What is kind of the most single practical step a patient or a physician can take today in order to kind of fight back against that bureaucratic system?
Yeah, I think kind of the best thing I would recommend, let's say I'll take each side first. Patient side, first of all, 99% of people that are denied a claim don't appeal. And so only 1%, right? And then of those who appeal, baseline about 50% of them win. So first of all, do not pay the bill. If they deny, never pay that first bill. Appeal everything. Appeal, appeal, appeal. And I think kind of laid out a playbook, and there's appeal templates online. There's so many things you can do. It's not rocket science. It's some work on your end. And if you want to craft a customized one, it might take you a few hours. Now, on top of that, we have built free AI tools for patients that are available free to the public at www.counterforcehealth.org. So it's Counterforce Health, and they can look it up in the show notes. But there, we'd be happy to help you. And we basically took a bunch of models, we trained them on a bunch of strategies and data, and we can generate a well-crafted appeal letter for you in 2 minutes. Now, of course, still review it yourself before you submit, but that takes 5 hours of work down to 2 minutes, and frankly, is better than what most people can do on their own in terms of citations. But appeal everything. Second, and that's just an appeal to the insurer. Second, know your rights and know the whole path. If multiple appeals to the insurer fail, there's also what's called an external review process. And, there it varies state by state, but look into it on your state, Department of Insurance, reach out to the state insurance regulators. They want to talk to people. We have active dialogue with them. And I think some of them don't even know the magnitude of the claim denial crisis. So, reach out and make sure you use those things that are in your favor. For people who escalate to that external review, over 70% of them are winning. So that's kind of amazing. And then third, worst case, if it's a massive bill that's going to destroy you, take people to court, litigate. Most of the time in court, insurers will lose. So I think that there's a multi-step playbook that, you can do. And then at the same time, advocate for public action. This system is tragically broken. And, I really empathize that, people are frustrated. I don't think what happened in December, violence is not the answer, but it's happening because the system is not adjusting. So I think the best way to have a nonviolent and peaceful solution is for people to just write letters to their representatives and make them aware of the crisis that's happening, the magnitude of claim denials. And then people, government always catches up with a lag, but ultimately, the wheels of justice will turn. And I think the system can be fixed that way. From a physician standpoint, I think the answer is similar but slightly different, right? The physicians are drowning in this stuff, and they need to be spending their time actually treating and healing people, not sitting there doing this administrative paperwork and navigating this kind of Kafka-like maze. So I think on the physician side, there it's almost an urgency of absolutely use AI tools. And it doesn't matter if you use our tool, like, our tool is customized, but use ChatGPT, use whatever you can. Now, some of those have like HIPAA compliance concerns, so, may not be able to. But I'd say for patients, the absolute number one thing, and here I'll say, especially for patients who are independent or at small clinics, they're absolutely drowning. Even the ones at the big hospitals and academic medical centers are still drowning, but sometimes those people have massive amounts of staff helping with claims. But I think in all this, there's got to be AI, because one side has weaponized AI. And even if you are a large hospital, even if you're Memorial Sloan Kettering, there's no way you have enough people on your team when Insured is denying something programmatically in 1 second using an algorithm. There's no way, with all the resources in the world, even if you're paying people $25 an hour to deal with this stuff, like, you're going to go bankrupt. So you have to use technology. So I'd say that. And then on the physician side, I think advocacy is very important, because our healthcare workforce is drowning and burning out. And I think the administrative burden is going to result in a shortage of clinicians. I talk to, through CareYaya, we have tons of students who are caring for the aging population across America, over 40,000 students. And this is one of their top concerns. They see what practicing physicians doing, what practicing physician assistants are doing. And they're like, second guessing, is this a career I want to go into? So I think if we don't solve this, we're going to have a massive healthcare workforce shortage. I mean, who would want to do this stuff? So I think policy action and raising this with representatives is the only way to push for solutions.
Yeah, I really love that answer, and thank you for that, Neal, because I do feel like the system has become somewhat perverse in that these insurers are almost incentivized to deny, to hit certain target denial rates or certain thresholds, rather than being incentivized to promote and facilitate and support fair and equitable care. So I think your book, equipping patients, equipping physicians with a toolkit and with the strategies that they need so that they can kind of follow step by step how to navigate some of these denials is so critically important. And I just kind of want to underscore that statistic that you had mentioned, of less than 1% of all denied claims are ever appealed, despite the fact that over 40 to 50% of those appeals succeed. And apologies, my cat is
no worries. That's awesome.
But it's so important. It's so important for people to be aware of those statistics and to have those strategies and tools to be able to fight back. I wanted to talk a little bit more about technology, because you have also been at the forefront of change when it comes to leveraging innovation and technology to kind of navigate the prior authorization system and kind of the labyrinth-like challenges that it presents. You talked about being able to use LLMs to draft appeal letters. I also saw that there is at Counterforce Health, you're working on a voice AI agent that kind of does autonomous robotic calls. Can you speak a little bit more about how you see AI and technology and innovation fitting into this fight back playbook?
Yes. Yeah. I think that, it doesn't end with just a letter, right? Because, like, if you think about the insurers, a lot of these are roadblock tactics, because what doesn't get fully appealed through is captured as profit, So under the guise of efficiency, because of course I understand the point, right? That there might be frivolous care attempted, to be given. So, that's why denials exist. But under that guise, the denial rates have skyrocketed, right? In many of these insurers, you look 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was like 1% of claims were denied, 2% of claims were denied, right? That seems like, normal. At the same insurer now, it's 15%, 20%. So, somebody's figured out the scam here that, okay, I can just deny more and say, oh, I don't know if this care is unnecessary. And then if people just don't bother to fight back, I just pocket it as profit, right? So, and no one's really regulating or paying attention here. So I think that's the tragedy. So knowing that cynically, going into it, saying, hey, these people are doing it on purpose, that it's by design, it's not a broken system, it's broken on purpose. That, okay, just writing letters, as soon as you make LLMs good and, start jamming a lot of letters, these guys will just throw up another BS roadblock, which will be, oh, now you got to call. And, everybody knows that. And I've done that even manually, a few years ago when I was writing letters. It's like, okay, now you have to call, talk to the rep. So what I found is all these roadblocks create a barrier to patients and physicians. But let's say on the patient side, it creates both a time barrier of where do I have the time to write a letter? Okay, great. Counterforce solved that. It took 5 hours of time in 2 minutes. Now where do I have the time to call and chase that person down, follow up with the insurance company and see what's the status, talk through, kind of any specific questions they may have. There's a time barrier to that, and there's a stress barrier. I think the call creates even more stress than a letter does because you have to talk to someone. Now, if you talk to most of these people, they are very rude. They're very dismissive, and they waste a lot of time putting you on unnecessary holds. So imagine the moral harm and the actual harm on, let's take a cancer patient living by themselves. They're already sick. They're already worried about their own mortality. They got a denial letter. Okay, they appealed it. Now they got to call and talk to someone who's going to be rude, dismissive, and put them on multiple holds. Like, your blood boils when you're dealing with this manually. And many times they're putting AI on the other line to just make you wait and wait by the time you talk to a human. So I hate to say, this is almost like a tragedy. Like, I wish people didn't have to innovate like this, but we're like, okay, you know what? Then screw you. We're going to put an AI on the other end and build voice AI so that your friend Maxwell, that's what we call it, like Maxwell, it's kind of a pun. So your friend Maxwell will just call the insurer and waste their time. And these voice AI models are getting really good where you can't even tell. So I kind of view it as like, I wouldn't otherwise do this, but you know what? I hate the scam that's going on, and I feel bad for all these patients. And the voice AI can take unlimited amount of stress, doesn't care, right? This isn't a cancer patient getting super stressed out. The stress is not good for patients. Talk about healthcare, right? These insurers are not providing healthcare. They're actually actively harming the people that are sick by doing this. So yeah, the voice AI can do this way more efficiently and critically way more informed, because while it's important to have a model that is writing letters, imagine the real-time adjudication back and forth with an insurer. Like, again, it's asymmetric warfare. The individual cancer patient doesn't know all the questions to answer, right? They can't cite medical necessity and journal articles on the fly. So they're going to get kind of bogged down in these calls, get even more stressed and intimidated, say, oh, okay, I'll call you back, go research stuff. This is something on the fly a voice AI agent can do very fast. So that's on the patient side. Same exact thing happens on the clinic side. These clinics are drowning in this stuff, and even at large hospitals. Like, physicians don't have the time, oftentimes they have to get on the phone, oftentimes they have to just repeat the same old information. So when you have repetitive knowledge-based information, that is the best task that can be outsourced to an AI. And when it's this stressful, and when people are doing it that should be doing something else, like in this case, a cancer patient should be spending time healing. A physician who's treating people should be spending time actually helping patients, not, litigating some BS on the phone with an insurer. This is the perfect thing that an AI can do for you, save you time, do it better than you could do it, and save you stress. So that's really, I think, the power of voice AI, and I think that's where this is all heading.
I don't want to spoil too much of the book because I encourage our listeners and I want our listeners to go check it out themselves. But towards the end of the book, you also propose a 3-layer solution to healthcare reform. I was wondering if you could kind of just walk us through that proposal and your vision for healthcare justice within the United States.
Yeah, 100%. I think we absolutely need to get rid of insurers. I think the idea of this massive for-profit insurance game that exists, and like, my background is unique. Like, I am a capitalist, right? I believe in capitalism. Prior to this, I was a hedge fund manager. I worked in finance for 15 years. I really believe capitalism moves society forward, but critically, I believe in capitalism that adds value, not extractive capitalism. And I think that's a key difference. Most businesses in America, I encourage them to make profit. If somebody adds $100 of value in the world, who cares if they take $20 of value? Good for them. They created something, they added value. Who cares if they take $40 of value, right? They're adding value in the world. But I think that, when you measure the ratio of value created to value captured, the American health insurance industry is absolutely not capitalism. This is not creating value. Let's assume in a generous way it creates, $10 or $20 of value, and it extracts 30 or 40. But in my opinion, the American health insurance industry actually creates negative value by creating massive administrative burden, inflation of cost, wasting of tons of people's time. So let's say it's creating negative 20 of value, and it's still capturing 30 or 40 of value. Like, that's how capitalism collapses. So when you kind of think about a lot of the younger generation today is like hating capitalism and is, kind of thinking, hey, maybe there's a better system. It's like, it's because of stuff like this. Most businesses in America are adding a lot of value to society and bringing society forward. People are inventing cool new therapeutics. There's been just amazing innovation in everything, right? In transportation, in travel, and all that. And good for them. That's why we have one of the most advanced societies in the world and in history. But I think when you have businesses like this that are just purely extractive, rent-seeking businesses that have gone to almost on society, it's like, yeah, it's time to cut that cancer out. So I think that the solution is massively diminishing the role of for-profit health insurance, especially for a lot of basic care. Believe in free markets. So I would think consumerizing the market, patients deal directly to get care, and providers directly provide care without that middle layer. So strongly believe in a consumer market. Why aren't health savings accounts, given the same, kind of financial and tax advantage benefits that, there are to employers contributing to health insurance? So heavily believe in HSAs and people making consumer choice. And then, so that's one layer of it. The other layer is providers. A lot of physicians are going direct. You see this with the rise of direct primary care. You see this with the rise of a lot of functional health. There's healthcare system is evolving very rapidly where people are just saying, you know what, screw the insurers. I'm going to go direct to people. But right now that game is harder because insurers have a, kind of tax advantage and have just an advantage in how society's set up. So if you encourage people and allow people to unlimited fund HSAs, you encourage and allow, physicians to kind of go direct. And then the third thing that you have to think for is safety net. I do believe that not everyone can do that. So you either have to provide a universal catastrophic coverage safety net for people, so all basic normal care like routine medication, routine XYZ is covered. And then a major life event happens and there will be a insurer to help you. And, I'm kind of ambivalent on, should that be the government? I have mixed feelings on that. Or should it be a robust free market? I think which I think is totally fine. What I would say is currently we have neither. We have neither government doing it with kind of just like, hey, there's no profit motive. And critically, we don't have a free market. We have massive oligopolistic market concentration. And that is terrible. These insurers over the last 10 or 15 years have vertically and horizontally integrated. Just look at the series of mergers. So you have these monsters that, so why can't I start an insurance company? It's nearly impossible, right? Like I live in North Carolina. Let's say here, a lot of people are dissatisfied with insurers. I'd love to start one. And so would a bunch of other people. And the free market would solve the problem because you'd provide better service, you'd provide lower denials. But guess what? You can't. These guys have cornered the market and there's a tremendous amount of regulatory barrier to entry. So I think that if the government, one, legitimately enforces antitrust law and breaks up these monsters, right, which they should, and I don't know where people are asleep at the wheel for the last 15 years, and then two, actually lowers the barrier to people starting, then you have a thriving free market of competition. And then that market could provide universal catastrophic coverage, for everyone with government as kind of a backup. So I think that kind of solution. And then, of course, there's some nuances to, kind of what should government fund, but what should people fund out of pocket. But I basically think this $1 trillion+ of waste, that is being sucked away by this administrative, apparatus would just go away. And most people would just go direct. I actually think this is the way medicine used to be. I think a lot of doctors miss the old days 50, 60, 70 years ago. I think the relationship quality improves, right, between doctor and patient. And, just a lot of this paperwork and noise goes away. So, yeah, I think that's the system we got to move to, and we got to move fast. My final point is the demographics of the country are very scary. We have a rapidly aging population, and the aging population, especially in their 70s and beyond, consumes a lot of healthcare. So let's say you're heading into this with a $5 trillion industry. The baby boom started approximately 80 years ago, right, post-World War II, right, 1945 to 2025 today. So the oldest of the baby boomers are just starting to turn 80. project out the next 5 years, right? Massive population cohort is turning 75 to 80. Their healthcare needs are going to skyrocket. And we're heading into that with a completely crap system that's 5 trillion in size, administratively inefficient, wasting a lot of money. Health outcomes and life expectancy has not improved in the last, 10 years or so. So yeah, I think, we as a country are going to go bankrupt when all these people demand care, or all these people are not going to get care, and they're going to go bankrupt. So, I think the solution's got to be fully reform and change the system and get rid of all this waste.
Yeah, this rise of the needs for elder care, I think, is a perfect segue into our next topic. And I would like to pivot over to your work at CareYaya, but just to kind of wrap and tie a bow on that, thank you again for sharing insights about your book, Insured to Death. I encourage all of our listeners to go check it out.
Yeah, check it out.
So, you're kind of speaking to, this baby boomer generation, kind of the rise of the need for elder care. I would actually like to spotlight some of the work and pivot over to some of your work at CareYaya, where, you are the founder and the CEO. And in a nutshell, as I understand it, CareYaya connects those in need of elder care with college students who are studying and training to be healthcare professionals. So it's a great way to provide affordable elder care for those families in need, while also preparing those younger students to join the care workforce and to get the preparation and the training that they need. Is that an accurate description?
Yeah, 100%. We're connecting America's future doctors, physician assistants, nurses, nurse practitioners to care for older adults in their community. There is a massive crisis right now of shortage of caregiving workforce. People are not rushing to sign up to these jobs, and quality and affordability. A lot of the traditional care agencies are just not doing the job. They're charging exorbitant fees. They're paying the care workers nothing, and they're not fixing the caregiver shortage. So, I experienced this firsthand, and I thought there was something that could be done through technology and innovation. I saw it hiding in plain sight. Millions of wonderful students that want to give back to their community, that want to step up, that want to do this work, that gives them kind of great experience and training for future clinical careers. And instead, they're doing DoorDash food deliveries, or they're driving Uber, and they're working at the local coffee shop on campus. So I was like, okay, let's empower these students to help people in their community. A lot of people that have gone through caregiving, which I have personally, deeply personally in my family, a lot of people know in caregiver support groups, one of the best kept secrets is that if you're caring for a loved one and you don't want to find caregivers on your own, go to local nursing school. Go to your local university and post up flyers and find some wonderful healthcare students. They're incredibly reliable. They're so mission driven and motivated. And yes, they need to be paid because, they need funds. But, they'll do it at like affordable rates, and they'll do an amazing, reliable job. And best of all, the intergenerational relationships, that's just awesome. Like, older people love spending time with younger people. They don't feel like they're a burden and they're being kind of babysat, but they actually feel like I'm getting help while I'm mentoring somebody and helping them towards their path of becoming a doctor, becoming a nurse practitioner. So I think that society has really, kind of, unfortunately, over the last few decades, society has lost that kind of intergenerational bond. And I think that the best and most rewarding part of the work, beyond just solving the practical problem, is actually creating intergenerational relationships across America. It's really cool to see.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I just kind of want to spotlight, this workforce and the student caregivers. So I saw some interesting stats about the platform. Over 25,000 students on the CareYaya platform. Average caregiver rating of 4.9 out of 5 stars, which is fantastic. And only about 1 out of every 5 student applicants are accepted into the program. And I think that kind of speaks to the rigor of the background checks and the interviews and the evaluation process that you guys have instituted. And I've heard numerous stories about students, building multi-month, sometimes year-long relationships with families, which I think is very unusual in healthcare. So really, really cool work happening over on CareYaya. But in addition to that, I also saw that the company has been experimenting with a lot of AI-powered applications and technology to help people better manage care and their caregiving experience. Things like smart glasses and AI-assisted art therapy. Can you shed some more light on what your team is doing from a technology perspective?
Yeah. So, thanks for sharing all that. As we have now 10, and by the way, the updated number is over 40,000, so we have, the thing is growing like crazy, and it's actually now starting to go exponential, after building it over the last 3 years. We started with the first couple hundred people. And, we are finding, kind of an interesting insight that was unintended is we are sitting on the most tech savvy elder care workforce in the country, right? Like the majority of the elder care workforce in the country run by care agencies, not to knock them, but they're minimally educated people. Like less than, I think, 5% of them have any kind of college education. They're well-intentioned, nice people, but they're more kind of middle-aged. They've been doing caregiving professionally for a long time. They're not the most tech savvy. And as a result, the traditional care industry has a difficulty in transitioning to technology. Like even booking and scheduling appointments via app is somewhat difficult. So that industry has not evolved into the modern era the way that many other industries like Uber have for travel, or Airbnb or other, right? So I think that's kind of a barrier. At the same time, we have an aging population that a lot of technology is being developed for or could be developed for that they could benefit from, but a low tech skilled workforce cannot deliver. So CareYaya uniquely now has tens of thousands of America's best and brightest students who are digital natives. So they were born with smartphones and computers and, all this kind of technology, that I, even as a middle-aged person, have to take some time to learn. And they love bringing technology in the home. So we pair that with, okay, we have a lot of innovation ideas, and what else can we do to bring tech to improve the lives of older adults? So, we've, and this has been awesome. It's like the whole work has been grant funded from, Johns Hopkins University, my alma mater, University of Pennsylvania, the National Institute on Aging. So we found kind of like a lot of people who support and want to fund AI innovation and tech innovation to improve elder care. And then as a result, we're able to just give this stuff away for free. So yeah, like you mentioned, we've built like AI-powered smart glasses for people living with dementia to recognize objects and people, around them. That's kind of like a nice, cool concept project that, of course, will take years more of further development and refinement. We've built AI-powered art therapy for people to engage in therapeutic art activities. We actually just won a major grant from the National Institute on Aging to develop voice AI companions to both check in on people when caregivers not around. A lot of times the family member is like, okay, I'm having caregivers around all the time, but I can't afford 24/7. So I want to see what my mom or dad is up to. So this is awesome to have like conversational voice. Yeah, we've built a lot of other cool tools like that. We're building an advanced care planning AI bot. We're doing that in collaboration with Duke University School of Medicine and National Institutes of Health. And that's something where we find a lot of people don't have advanced care plans because clinicians don't have the time to get them on everyone. But voice AI can be a very powerful tool to help facilitate those conversations. So I'm very excited about that because students in home who are digitally native and tech savvy, armed with tech tools, can now bring this tech to the older generation. And I think that's where a lot of tech innovation attempts have been stymied. People build the coolest stuff, and then it's like, how do you get an 80-year-old living at home with dementia to use that thing? It's going to fall on the 50-year-old daughter, right, when she comes over for a couple hours a day. And, these family caregivers, they don't have the time. They don't have the time to learn this stuff. So I think that's been awesome that by having the care delivery force, you can now mobilize technology into people's homes and eventually even hardware. And I think the ultimate goal is aging in place. I don't know if you ever heard that term, but a lot of older adults want to kind of age in place. They don't want to go into a, assisted living facility or skilled nursing facility if they can avoid it. And most people prefer to age at home. Most people prefer to die at home. The barrier is, as you near the end of your life, oftentimes due to physical abilities or cognitive abilities, you lose a lot of independence. And for your own safety, your family members will just say, okay, I have to put you in somewhere. Otherwise, I can't monitor you and can't help you. But technology is advancing so rapidly that between, technologies like AI and hardware technology, I think you could create a home environment that is more and more safe, paired with tech-savvy caregivers who help you navigate that environment. And then you could achieve people's dream of, I can age in place and spend my final years at home safely. So I think that's kind of like the goal and mission. And I'm very excited about the potential of all the technology.
This has been fantastic. So, we've learned a little bit about your book. We've learned a little bit about your work at CareYaya and Counterforce Health. I now want to take a second pivot and just learn a little bit more about you and your journey and your story, because I think it's a fascinating one and one that would be very fascinating for our listeners. So earlier you had mentioned, prior to these ventures into the healthcare landscape, that you had worked in finance at various investment firms and talked a little bit about, kind of your belief in capitalism. But I'm curious, how did your time analyzing companies and really thinking about managing investments, how did that shape the way you approach healthcare and innovation today?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think it's been really helpful. So I started my career on Wall Street in investment banking right out of school, and I very quickly went into hedge funds. When I was 23, very quickly rose up the ladder and became a partner at a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund when I was 27, and I managed a turnaround, restructuring, distressed portfolio throughout the economic crisis of 2008, 2009. And I was the only person at the organization that had skills in kind of turnarounds and bankruptcies, and generated phenomenal returns, like fixing troubled companies. And as a result, one of their investors backed me to start my own fund when I was 31. And I grew that from 10 million to 250 million by the time I was 35. And, I was really good at it. I really enjoyed the work. And then just personal caregiving experiences happened to me. So I, literally wound down my fund and became a full-time caregiver. And that's how I found myself in this industry. I just couldn't believe the unmet need. But I'd say I'm very glad and grateful for the experience because I learned a lot. And I think that by investing in businesses, especially across an array of industries, including healthcare, but including other, you get a lot of ideas of what works and what doesn't, and how businesses innovate, how industries innovate, and also how industries decline. And I think that's been almost foundational in approaching any of this innovation work in healthcare. There are patterns from other industries that you can apply here of why isn't something XYZ? And I think one of the biggest things missing in healthcare is why isn't anything focused on the consumer experience? The patient as consumer. Like nothing is focused on that. Everybody builds, even in caregiving and elder care, you talk to, in people who've done digital innovation attempts, everything is built for the payer. And the consumer as patient is an afterthought, as in like, yes, we care about that too. Even a lot of kind of like healthcare tech, like these AI tools we're building for patients, it's like we are also then building them for physicians, clinics, and even hospital systems. But we start with the individual patient as consumer. And everybody in healthcare tech tells you, no, that's not how we roll. All the existing startup, that are larger, the healthcare VCs. So I think that people who don't have the cross-industry discipline or knowledge, oftentimes because they're too much into this is how it's always been, they don't realize and they're unable to do first principles. So I'm kind of glad I came from outside the industry because I approach everything almost like a child, with like first principles, like, oh, how does this work? You ask a million questions. Then you're like, why is it like this? And this is a question that somebody who's just come from the game doesn't bother to ask when they're 20 years in the game. They're just kind of like, oh, that's just how it is. And I think sometimes you have to have that childlike wonder, combined with knowledge of how other things work, to kind of bring change. But I think healthcare is one of the most, it's one of the biggest industries in America. It's certainly one of the most important in terms of this is people's health, this is people's life or death, and it's one of the worst run industries in the country. So yeah, I think it could learn a lot from how other industries work. So I think it's been really awesome, and I'm very grateful for the background I've had.
What's next for you, Neal? Are there any problems in healthcare you're itching to tackle that we haven't discussed?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that probably, frankly, one of the biggest next problems that I'm like looking at and thinking about, which I've been, personally impacted by through loved ones, is the alarming rise of cancer in younger and middle-aged people.
Mm.
Both kind of what is going on, societally, and really earlier diagnostics methods have to be developed as well as preventative. It's just like, I mean, I have nothing, detailed to share. I mean, it's just kind of like my personal passion. I've been researching it a lot, but I have my hands full kind of right now on my other work, but it's just something I see a lot, it's something I see a lot. And, I see some people trying to, innovate there, but I just think that there's a lot more that can be done. The problem is growing faster than the attempts to innovate and solve the problem. So I think that's been another kind of personal passion project. But I'd say for now, I got my hands full on, kind of just building awareness about claim denials. I don't even think we're in the first inning of that battle. Between the book and the Counterforce Health tools, we just had a big feature on NBC News yesterday, like NBC Nightly News nationally covered the work and how patients are using artificial intelligence to appeal. And that's the first time I've kind of seen a story like that go national. So I think we're in the first inning of that. So, I'm going to have my hands full on that. And the elder care, I mean, I hate to say it, I think we're in like the second or third inning of that. Like we've done a lot, but that crisis is, despite our innovation and other people's innovation, the crisis is getting worse faster than we can innovate because the population is aging so fast. and the elder care workforce is shrinking really fast. So people are drowning. So I think those are two major societal problems. I can't pick sometimes which day, depending on the day you ask me which one's worse, because I think elder care, if you don't solve it, I think we owe a debt of gratitude to the older generation, that's built the country, and we can't just leave them hanging. And that's going to fall on the middle-aged sons and daughters of aging parents if we don't solve it. Millions of people are going to drown and drop out of the workforce to take care of their parents by themselves. So I think we have to solve that as a country. And I think the claim denials crisis, I think we also have to solve as a country. So I'm absolutely obsessed with those. And so they kind of go hand in hand too. So yeah, I think I love doing this stuff. And it's like, I think that it's a thrill coming from a purely financial background to do like actual like humanitarian work. I legitimately feel like you're blending the best of both. That, there's a lot of times a lot of nonprofits don't scale because they're, just very like local, regional focused, and they're always reliant on external funding. And a lot of times pure businesses who enter certain fields will not do kind of the humanitarian work that needs to be needed. So I love kind of like approaching it with that blend of like social enterprise and, how can we solve problems in society using the power of business, which is one of the most powerful institutions in, I think, history that's moved societies forward, but do it in an empathetic way that helps people that are left behind. So yeah, it's been really fun.
Neal, you're a true force for change. This has been a fantastic and incredibly enjoyable experience. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share all this with your listeners. And I hope if even it inspires one person today, that'll be worth it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Cool. So I'll go ahead and stop the